All right, hey, welcome back. I told you we here at Condo Online have had a double feature of live shots today. We've been doing mental health awareness week talks with different people from the community that have been coming in here to our studio to talk openly about mental health in hopes of breaking the stigma and keeping the conversation going. Today, well, I was already here today, but still, now I am joined by the lovely Naomi. Watch this. Moi Sambili.
It's nice, isn't it? Yeah.
She told me I had to speak it like I'm speaking Italian. Even though she's from Tanzania. And I mean, it's great. So welcome.
Thank you.
Naomi. Thank you for coming in. And I mean, pretty much Naomi is coming in as a person who works with young people in mental health, but also all people really. But she works for a project called Neural Champions. That you started with your partner, Megan Charles.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your origin story?
Yeah, so it's great to be here, so thank you for inviting me. I'm Naomi Mwasambili, and to just maybe talk a bit about our organisation, we set up an organisation, myself and Megan, who I actually studied with at Liverpool Uni about 15 years ago. So we did psychology together, and then we stayed friends. And then around 5 years ago, we sort of started coming up with ideas around how we could set up an organisation that could work on projects that could support people at different stages, embedding technology around their health and mental health. So we set up an organisation called Shanira, which I guess is an innovation organisation. So we manage a range of different projects, and one of them is Neuro Champions. And Neuro Champions, in its simplest form, teaches young people about the brain, neuroscience, mental health through play, and uses technology for good to support young people to be content creators rather than consumers of the technology that's around their world 24/7. And I guess we started Neuro Champions because there's loads of different mental health programs that are around, and working in mental health for about 12 years now, it's probably reached its peak. So, everybody's talking about it, and it's not that people aren't talking about it, but there's still, I guess, a lack of variety in the support and the way that we can learn about ourselves. And what we did about, I guess, 4 or 5 years ago, we started going around asking people if they'd learned about the brain at school. So I'll ask anybody if you learnt about the brain.
I didn't learn about the brain.
And that's the answer that we heard. We didn't learn about the brain, even in biology sometimes. But our brains are our life force, and they interact with the things that we drink, we eat, our environment, they process our emotions, and why do we not know more about it? So what we wanted to do is to create a program that allowed people to love their brains and learn about them through that process. And so that's how Neuro Champions was born.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, it sounds fascinating. I mean, because even though you say it's for all kids and stuff like that, well, what is the age range, by the way?
So we work with young people from the age of 8 all the way up to 25.
Right.
And so we work in school contexts, we work in community contexts, we work in hospitals, so we've done work with Alderhay, we work with Liverpool City Council, so we go anywhere where young people are, and it's not about,
You were also at the Brain Charity as well, wasn't it?
And so we've spoke to the Brain Charity, so we haven't run a programme there as of yet, so we will.
Ooh, sorry. Brain Charity, get on it.
We spoke to the net as well, but because they do great work about providing support for people with brain injuries, and positioning the importance of knowing about the brain as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, before we get into, the brain and mental health and all that kind of stuff, I just wanted to say another thing about Naomi, because, I'm not a troll, but I'm on Facebook. But you've been up for it. I'm just prefacing. She's like, what?
Our world is out there now, isn't it?
Naomi,
So
you were in New York. You were a finalist in some award and everything. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so early this week I was up for Entrepreneurial Spirit Award as part of the Great British Entrepreneur Awards, which is exciting and great, and I think I really believe in the power of entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship to challenge and solve social problems. So I've been working for a long time using the power of enterprise, and it looks different in different ways, to be able to solve challenges specifically in mental health. So yeah, I think the entrepreneurship spirit, I'm not sure what the definition of it is. I don't know if it's like
I think it's somebody who has a spirit of entrepreneurship.
Okay, the spirit, and yeah, and keeps going through what often is a really difficult journey. Enterprise and setting up your business is like, I'd say, one of the hardest things you can do.
It is.
You know,
it
there's this glossy view around like what business is and setting up a business, and actually it's dirty and stressful and will test your mental health at all levels, and often it's your drive and passion and this like belief you have around making a change or developing a product that will keep you going, but it isn't an easy journey. And so I think, you know, I run an organisation, but I also try to support different people through mentoring, through running programmes. I'm entrepreneur in residence at London South Bank. I'm involved with the School for Social Entrepreneurs because I believe it's really important to have like honest stories around your journey, and I've learned so much from other entrepreneurs, specifically ones where their enterprises hasn't worked, because you get the truth from them. You like hear everything.
They're on the ground.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
everything. So when you're in the room with them and you know, you're able to hear their stories on a one-to-one level or even in a group setting, it's still something that inspires you to kind of like, okay, so this is what I may be doing, may not be doing, or whatever and everything. So all those little tips do help.
Definitely. And just that space to be honest, because I think that you have to sometimes be really passionate about what you're doing, and sometimes you don't feel it. So it's good to be around other social entrepreneurs as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. Now, I mean, you know, back to the brain.
Yeah. I
kind of like said this, why the brain? For you?
Why not? Why not? People have asked us that, and also said, you know, but does teaching about the brain really help people? And I was just like, you know...
Tell that story about the dehydration.
Yeah, so we always have like these little brain stories, and I guess one of the things that often people are is dehydrated. It's really hard to drink 2 litres of water a day, but sometimes that might cause us to have a headache. And the first thing people do is maybe get a paracetamol or painkiller if you've got a headache, but it takes your body maybe about 45 minutes to rehydrate if you've drunk something, whereas a painkiller will take about 10 minutes. And so, you know, understanding that your brain needs water to survive and for you to be optimum in your performance and the things you're doing is something that most people don't know, and they haven't learned. And in the same sense that we bring play into a lot of our work. Like, play lights up so many parts of your brain, and because you've got to use so much for playing.
It's a stimulus.
Completely, it's a stimulant. But also you've got to sometimes like problem solve, you laugh, you feel a bit anxious, but then you're relieved. And so, you know, play is really, really important. But as adults, we don't often play in our life. And, you know, it's sometimes drummed out of us as children, or we see it as like something that's bad.
It's kind of like that thing, that fad about the Sit-Fit or Fit-Sit or whatever it is, the Fitbit, you know, where it's like, how many times do you stand a day or whatever and all that kind of stuff. And what it actually does for your body, you know, just like standing, because a lot of us have those jobs where we're just sitting there at the computer all the time, you know, because you were saying that what I liked about the dehydration bit was the fact that instead of taking paracetamol, maybe take a drink of water, you know what I mean? Because your brain is like, you know, drying out and everything. But you also
can you visualize that like a dried out brain?
I can visualize the dried out brain because it's happened to me so many times where I have these tension headaches, and they're called tension headaches or migraines, and it's like, dude, have a drink of water.
Just try that first.
Just try that first before you put pills in your body. But you know, different functions of the brain you were talking about, you know, I mean, and the adolescent brain and stuff. Because the reason why I'm asking these, it's not like I'm testing it, but it's just that I just think it's also important to the conversation around mental health.
Yeah, no, definitely. So we always like sort of ask the question, like, when do you think the brain stops growing? And it's always changing throughout lifetime, but I want to ask, when do you think the brain stops growing?
Oh, well, I didn't know what was the test for me. But I think the brain the brain. I think the brain grows until it can expand outside my head. I don't know.
Yeah.
30?
30. So not far. It's about 25.
Oh my God, I'm close.
So yeah, and our brains are always changing and adapt to our environment. But actually, your brain is developing usually until 25, and
Right.
specifically the frontal part and the frontal lobe, which is the part of your brain that deals with emotions. It does so many different things, and so during like teenage years and adolescence, like the brain is
We're still
transforming.
stupid. Yeah.
We're not stupid. We're
All right,
amazing. We're amazing.
There you
But
go.
what happens is like things like risk taking and challenging behaviours and emotion regulation is all part of the frontal lobe, and so actually that's developing and it's not fully developed. So
Which is why kids are so fearless. Is that what
which is why they might be fearless, which is why they might get frustrated and not be able to articulate how they're feeling or their emotions, and which is why there might be certain things that they get involved in that as adults you'll be fearful of, or you'll say no, this is too risky, but actually it's about their age. And I think that if we knew that and we were aware of it, we'd think about how we connect with teenagers and young people in a different way. We'd think about how we design education really differently.
Oh, don't get me
for young
started.
people. And so what I guess we want to do in Neuro Champions is equip young people with that knowledge. And so one of the things that they often say is gosh, I didn't realise my brain was still growing, and that's why I felt like this. And it normalises certain things for them, but also they can start to, I guess, love parts of their behaviour and why they're doing it, because it's not a problem, it's not an issue, actually it's just normal part of their development.
Yeah, I mean, I think we always just look at development from a hormonal sense, like whether people are young or vibrant, too young for this, young for that, but the brain, actually where the knowledge is the shelf. That makes a lot of sense what you just said. So let's talk a little bit before we go into games about child mental health, because basically we've had young people in and we had adults in and stuff like that, but we haven't really actually looked at it around child mental health, because it's usually something that maybe because it's still developing, that we don't really talk too much about and stuff. And I was asking you about the autistic spectrum, which I can't clarify the date of when it started to become of major importance for us to be aware of. But can we just attest that a child may not just have one thing, right? Like say Asperger's, dyspraxia, mutism, all that kind of stuff. But they have, it's like a Venn diagram, isn't it? The autistic spectrum chart. Right? So there's so many different things, which is why they take a long time before they ascertain the diagnosis for someone. I mean, from your perspective, in dealing with neuro champions and actually having to study the brain and stuff like that, I mean, what is your perspective around that, around that could lead into helping parents around child mental health? I know it's deep, but
it's deep and massive.
Deep and massive.
Deep and massive.
Don't worry about it. We swim.
That's good. And I think that we have the view that every child is individual, and with autism, which is a spectrum, autism isn't just one thing. Like young people can present and behave in so many different ways, and it's different across gender, it's different across ages, it's different across cultures, but autism impacts all young people. And I think in relation to sort of the brain, and I don't like this concept of a normal brain and an abnormal brain, and so we just teach young people about brain, but I think with autism, some research, and it's really early, and it's important to say that with research, but the view is that when we grow, when we develop, what happens is we go through our brains prune. So what I mean is they get rid of certain things, like connections they don't need, and then they strengthen certain connections. And with young people maybe who are on the autism spectrum, that pruning doesn't happen in the same way. So you have quite a lot of connections maybe in your brain, and what that might mean, it might lead to, is young people might get overstimulated by certain things, and that might present in behaviours to sort of young people feel quite overwhelmed with sound, or maybe don't want to have eye contact with people because they can't read emotions. There's so many different ways that can present in young people, but what happens is often with autism, people get so stuck on the behaviour, what happens, and then they label that young person a problem, or other young people might bully them, and then that then leads to other different issues that can come from it.
Because, I mean, I think maybe I was also looking at it from the education review, because, like, I mean, with the games that you play and you put into your project, and we'll put up, like, well, actually identify the website and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But, like, when my son was in nursery, you know, he had to be in the sensory room.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So colors, sounds, and all that. Then there's also the factor that, I think it's dyslexia, where they're now identifying that they have to have different colored papers, you know, for students and everything.
Yeah.
My thing about it is the factor that the education system that these kids are still being forced to take part in 100 years later doesn't work compared to these new forms of learning. Now that we are adjusted to the autistic spectrum, right? Should we be teaching differently? You know, and it's not an attack on the school system as much, but in your opinion, what do you think?
I think definitely. I think school and health as well. So, like, you know, I trained as a therapist and worked as a psychological therapist in the NHS, and I didn't do training around autism when I was training, or how my therapy could, and even simple things like when I printed off forms, they were printed on bright white pieces of paper, which for people who have dyslexia, it's really hard to be able to see. Now, those simple ways of adapting aren't necessarily taught within, health. Education, they are to an extent, but actually a lot is around behavioural management in schools now, because there's so much pressure on attaining certain outcomes. It's not necessarily always focused around the well-being of the child.
GCSEs is the main thing, isn't it? It's
GCSEs, SATs, like this year, and this is what's been really, really sad and worrying. There's been a massive spike in young people with anxiety who are in year 6 because of the introduction of the new SATs. Now, we've heard that from teachers, from young people, from paediatricians, from A&E departments in hospitals, because young people are going to hospital because they're so anxious and they're then feeling like suicidal and low, and they've got to be prescribed medication. Now, we can focus on like trying to do stuff for the mental health of young people, but actually a really simple way of changing that is changing the SAT system. Why are we putting all this pressure unnecessarily on young people?
No, exactly. That's what I was just trying to say, is the fact that like, you know, there are school systems, like, you know, if you look at the Michael Moore movies, or, you know, like in Finland or whatever, it's like the classroom, the length of class time, or, you know, time for play, as you were talking about.
Do you need more factory workers?
Yeah. Voice for the universe says we need more. I don't know what that means.
I guess there's maybe a view that what school does is it primes you to behave in a certain way, and so you know, maybe it isn't necessarily always. And I don't think it's all schools. I think that we can have a sweeping view around it, but you know, actually, it's not necessarily around always instilling the creativity of young people and youth. And what we're sort of talking about is, if you're thinking about the whole well-being, you've got to bring out the, you know, the creativity, the arts, those important things, music, that is so fundamental for people's well-being and ways of expressing, as well as the science and the maths and the, you know, the STEM side. So I think that, you know, when you talk about the voice and the background there, factory workers, is, you know, in a factory everybody's got to do the same thing, and schools can sometimes be seen as factories because all young people are treated in the same way. I don't know if that was
but like the thing about it is the fact that, you know, because it's kind of like even myself was saying, I mean, once I get through the science thing, whatever, I'm not going to use it, you know. And that's kind of like what young people are often thinking, is that it's a shame when they have to think that half of their lessons are a waste of their time. Do you know what I mean? And it's hard to define how it is important, because when are they going to use certain things? You know, I remember studying all of that stuff in school myself, and it's still impermeating into my memory, but it's not impermeating into my memory like, thank God I know about Hoyle's Law. Well, actually it is when my muscles stretch and they tighten, but I'm just trying to say is, it's like, you know, and all that.
And I think it's because it's a lot of the time learning is like theoretical, and I think that, you know, actually, like, and within the program we do a lot by doing, and so it's not saying this is this theory. Actually, you know, if you're a maker, so we had a young person who is just amazing. He was 13 on one of our programs, and he was diagnosed with the autism spectrum and really didn't engage with school and just actually said a few words within the sessions initially. But each week would come with something else that he'd made. So he had this 3D printer, so he was making these things. So then we started setting him little challenges. You know, in the group he wasn't going away, and probably about halfway through he came and he'd made this like Raspberry Pi computer at home that was fully working.
Wait! Don't bury the lead. Raspberry Pi.
So yeah, a Raspberry Pi board. So like a, you know, it's like a memory board where you can make your own computers.
Oh right.
So yeah.
Is that what it's called?
So yeah, Raspberry Pi. Have a check of Raspberry Pi Foundation. So you can build like mini computers, and you can also like build sensors through something called Arduino. But he'd gone away, ordered these parts, built this computer, and it was like covered in masking tape on the outside. You could switch it on, you could type, you could do everything with it. Like in school, he might have not been necessarily seen as like achieving, but he's amazing. Like he's an engineer, you know, he's able to bring different materials together and put them together, but we don't often see that in school environments. He's diagnosed on the autism spectrum, you know, and it's because he is a maker. That's the environment he needs to be in. And so we have loads of young people who have got amazing talents, but they just need to be in practical spaces where they can learn, try out, apply, and be then given the positive feedback. And one of the, I guess, gaps in schools is the technology gap of teachers and their knowledge around technology, and young people and their knowledge, because young people are the experts a lot of the time, and that challenges the power balance of what schools are like. So
you know what I mean, you know, because as a as a teacher myself, you know, I often find that because technology in the media changes every like 3 to 6 months, you know, it's very difficult for a teacher to deal with all the work that they have to already deliver to keep up. So they treat media more as self-taught learning. You go learn it and teach me, you know, that kind of thing. You know, that's what I often find is the case. But, you know, big shout out to the studio school, I like to say, because they kind of like follow that paradigm, which you're saying, of different pathways. You know, if you send a young person down a pathway that they want to go, you still could teach them English and maths and sciences, but, you know, you give them time within their curriculum to do other things like electronics or games or, you know, film, that kind of deal. So I'm totally up for that. So speaking of games, that was like a segue. Woo, segue! So you mentioned this kind of like 3D printed thing before, but you were telling me about the 3D printed brain and stuff as a game.
Yeah, so I guess we wanted to embed games and play, so we've created like offline and online games for the program. So the program's like a 12-week program, and so throughout it we have different games that we have. So there's a 3D printed brain, which we called Neurotransmit, which actually started as a paper game. So we got like brains printed on paper, we cut them out, and it was a puzzle, and then that evolved from there to now be like a 3D printed brain. And so people have got
What does it look like?
What's it look like? I can send you a picture.
Alright, but I mean, does it look like a brain?
Oh yeah, it looks like it's an actual brain. So it's
That's what I want to know.
It's 12 pieces, and so you've got like the frontal lobe, you've got the temporal lobe, occipital, so all the different structures. So we call them the gross structures of the brain.
You know, I am totally fascinated by these 3D printing machines. That's why I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt, but
no, they're amazing.
Yeah.
They're great. I think, you know, we have this plastic conversation, but 3D printing, there's so many materials now that can be used for 3D printing, and we run some of our groups. So we initially ran some at Centre City. We've got a 3D printer in our office. We work with the Fab Lab now at Liverpool John Moores University, because also we find that sometimes being in environments like that for young people, they can start to think about how that technology can be used creatively. But for us, you know, actually we can just print off brains in the office, which is quite cool.
Shout out to Daz Liverpool, because they do 3D printing as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And stuff. So you also had another game of like Battle of the Robots.
Yeah.
I say that like Battle of the Planets, but Battle of the Robots.
Yeah.
And it's not Rock'em Sock'em.
It's not rocket soccer with the brain now. And again, it's a simple. So we've got like a big giant like A0 brain that you put on the floor, and we've got mini robots. And for different quiz questions, you have to race the robots to different parts of the brain as teams. To sort of like answer the questions. And this is a geeky side, so like the little I guess robots we see as like neurons, because that's what happens in your brain. You've got these
neurons are firing.
Yeah,
like a maze.
And you know what? That was actually all built with our team. So you know, it was myself and Megan who sat Neuro Champions, and one of our first team members was a girl called Juliet Simpson, and we sat down and like thought of these different games, and we've got like a scenarios game.
Hopefully you copywritten and trademarked these games.
Yeah. I mean, the Neuro Champions is trademarked.
I love how she said yeah. That means no.
I mean, Neuro Champions is trademarked. Like we've done it, but I think that one of the elements of what we're developing with the program, you know, it wasn't about us becoming like a youth provision. It was around how we can build the capacity of other people working with young people to use these things and make them as accessible as possible. So some of the elements of the work we do is open source, because actually that will be around sharing, and some of the work that we're creating allows us to be sustainable. Yeah.
But these games also, let's just like since coming down to the end, so you're mixing the young people together and everything as well. So it also helps that make it inclusive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then like where you have like your maker kids along with your regular kids, along with your SEN kids, and everybody, you know, all come together. So where can people find Neuro Champions, or how can they utilize your services?
Yeah, so you can look at our website, which is www.neurochampions.com.
Very simple.
Yeah, everything just is Neuro Champions. So we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, Facebook. You can email us, welcome@neurochampions.com.
I mean, but you were saying that Neuro Champions, you don't have your own base. Is that
yeah,
right?
So we're based up in the Science Park. So we're based at Liverpool Science Park. So we do have a base, but we often run our programs outside. And what we're doing
so
now,
your outreach.
Yeah, we go out. We're outreach, and what we're doing now is we're training a lot of trainers to facilitate the programs. So we've recently trained up teachers in the Northeast. In primary schools, so they're delivering the Neuro Champions program starting next week. We've also got a collaboration with IVHQ, which is a volunteering organisation for Jamaican project. So we're training up volunteers who are going working in Jamaica, and so they're working in classes in Jamaica as well.
So if you want a trip to Jamaica. Yes,
so if you ever want a trip or you want to go and volunteer, it's great. And I think for me, I'm passionate because you can learn, but you can give quite a lot as well.
Yeah.
And I'm half Jamaican, and so that, you know, part of the reason was, you know, we're often privileged, even though we have different problems in the UK around what we've got access to technology, to learning, and some young people don't, and you know, role modelling is really, really important for many young people. So
and that's what I wanted to be able to end on, that this is a lot of it's a positive self-development kind of scenario, isn't it, and everything. You know, and it's very positive getting young people into working and studying the brain as a form of play, because that's usually kind of like a way of really getting it to sink in, isn't it?
Definitely, and they should be the future neuroscientists, the future researchers, the
We
future
do need that.
technologists. They are. So it all starts with the brain.
All starts with the brain. Well, you know what? You know, Naomi, I'd like to thank you for coming in,
Thank
you know, and giving up your seat earlier, but then still taking part into the Mental Health Awareness Week talks. I was going to say, Naomi, Mwasambili. Thank you very much. I'm Chase Johnston Lynch, and I love saying that like I'm an Italian. But, you know, hey, you know, please check out Neuro Champions, because it's definitely a good project to work with and everything. And thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for watching. Peace out.